On March 7, 2004, Zimbabwean authorities arrested about 70 men at the Harare International Airport for illegal arms trafficking and immigration violations. It soon came to the surface that these men in question were mercenaries that were on their way to Malabo, the capital city of Equatorial Guinea, to overthrow the long-time leader of the country, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo. These mercenaries had been organized by mainly British financiers, including Mark Thatcher, the son of the former UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The leader of this group was Simon Mann, a former partner in the defunct private military firm Executive Outcomes. As their cover story, Simon Mann claimed that they were picking up weapons for a security job at a mine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. After about 2 weeks, the conspirators in each country signed confessions admitting that they were headed to Equatorial Guinea to stage the infamous coup known as the Wonga Coup, with the word Wonga being British slang for money. In this episode of African Biographics, we look at an account of this audacious yet error-prone 2004 coup attempt against the president of Equatorial Guinea by these mercenaries. Before looking at the coup, let's look at a brief history of Equatorial Guinea. The country gained independence from the Spanish colonial authorities in 1968, and the first ruler of the country, Francisco Marcias Nguema, quickly assumed the mantle of a stereotypical brutal African dictator. In 1979, 37-year-old Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo, then the governor of Bioko province and the nephew of Marcias Nguema, overthrew his uncle's regime. Since then, Teodoro has been at the helm of power. His country, Equatorial Guinea, struck oil in the mid-1990s, and ever since then, the former Spanish colony has become one of sub-Saharan Africa's biggest oil producers. Against this backdrop, the conspirators of the coup against Teodoro Obiang wanted to overthrow the incumbent regime and install a leader that would grant them access to the country's untapped resources. Now that we know the background to this, let's look at the characters who conjured up the grand plan to oust Teodoro Obiang and the roles that each one of them had to play. The main mastermind and financier of this plot was said to have been Eli Khalil, the now late Nigerian-Lebanese millionaire. Born in northern Nigeria, Khalil had flourished as a trader, supplying Nigeria's army with basic goods. He later invested in property and then traded oil. In June of 2002, he was arrested in Paris while traveling on a Senegalese passport. Investigators had been looking into a massive case of corruption that involved the French state oil company Elf Aquitaine, which is now part of Total, for which it is alleged that Eli Khalil had attempted to bribe the former Nigerian president Sani Abacha in order to obtain preferential treatment in the extraction of oil. He was acquitted on this charge as there had been insufficient evidence. According to his co-conspirators of the Wonga Coup, the plan for Khalil in Equatorial Guinea was quote-unquote a simple one. The plan was overthrow President Teodoro Obiang and install an acceptable ruler who would give Eli Khalil and his cronies access to the country's oil riches without the responsibility of running a country. To enact his plan, Khalil needed 3 ingredients, and these were a pliable and acceptable ruler to replace President Teodoro, 2. a small disposable army, and 3. funds from big player investors interested in reaping the wealth of Equatorial Guinea. The first key ingredient for Khalil was a man called Severo Moto Nsa, a former seminary student and an exiled opposition leader from Equatorial Guinea. Severo Moto had been living in exile in Madrid, Spain for almost a decade, hiding out to avoid punishment for his first attempt to overthrow Obiang. Severo Moto fled to Spain and applied for political asylum to keep himself safe from imprisonment. So now, as part of the Wonga Coup, the plan was to have Severo Moto be installed as the new president. In exchange for putting Moto in power, the mercenary forces would be given $1.8 million and valuable oil concessions in Equatorial Guinea. Now let's take a look at the mercenaries, or the soldiers of fortune, who are going to be the main executors of the plot. And we start with the leader, and who some would say was the main actor, Simon Mann. Simon Mann was an ex-British soldier and was in his 50s at the time. Simon Mann had struggled to leave his military past behind. After leaving the military, he had a brief career in computers and ran a business providing bodyguards to wealthy clients. But he soon wound up as a soldier of fortune defending oil interests in Angola. In the early 1990s, he co-founded Executive Outcomes, a security consultancy. Executive Outcomes developed a formidable reputation delivering advice and armed guards to protect businesses operating in conflict zones. The company earned millions from Angola's government by guarding oil installations against rebel attacks. You can get more details on Executive Outcomes in this brilliant video by the channel AfriStory Productions, which I have linked down below. In the mid-1990s, Simon Mann entered a partnership with fellow Scots guardsman Tim Spicer. They established another private security firm, SANDLINE International, which was soon being linked to the civil war in Sierra Leone. The firm is believed to have delivered logistical support, including guns, to the country while it was under United Nations arms embargo. A few years down the line, Simon Mann was now semi-retired, and his friends say by the year 2002, Simon needed to make a big hit, not only to maintain his financial status, but also to keep his hand in the game, the mercenary game. So he took heed of the call that came from Eli Khalil to try and depose President Teodoro Obiang and make some money along the process. He would bring in some of his ex-mercenary colleagues into the loop to set up a small army, and one of these colleagues was a man called Nick du Toit. Nick du Toit was a white South African who had been a colonel in 32 Battalion of the South African Army during the Angolan Bush War. After the end of apartheid in South Africa, du Toit became a mercenary and an arms dealer. Nick du Toit had known Simon Mann since he had approached Simon regarding an investment in a Congo diamond mine back in 1989. Nick had also worked for Executive Outcomes in Angola and Sierra Leone. Nick du Toit relocated to Equatorial Guinea in 2003 and began setting up what on the surface looked to be a legitimate commercial enterprise. In the confession that he would sign way after his arrest, Nick conceded that he had come to Equatorial Guinea with the purpose of setting up a front company that would arrange logistical support in advance of the coup. Also part of his role in the Wonga Coup was to set up the army. He recruited his old friends from 32 Battalion, a mix of South Africans and Angolan nationals. Now let's look at one more of the major characters whose involvement raised eyebrows around the world because of his high profile. In testimonies that surfaced after the coup had broken down, Simon Mann testified that his former friend Mark Thatcher, the son of the former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, was a main partner and one of the financiers in the plot. Thatcher admitted giving $275,000 towards the charter of a helicopter, saying he thought it was for commercial purposes and discovered only later that it was to be used by mercenaries. But Simon Mann gave a contradictory testimony. Mann said Thatcher paid $350,000 for a helicopter and a plane which he knew would be used in the plot, and that he also attended meetings about the plan with Eli Khalil in London. So now that we know some of the main characters in this coup, let's now look at the plan that they devised to overthrow Teodoro Obiang. Between May and December of 2003, the coup plot was hatched in London and in Cape Town, South Africa. And as I mentioned earlier, a syndicate of financiers was drawn in, including Mark Thatcher, then living in South Africa, who helped buy a helicopter which he claimed he did not know what it was to be used for. During the planning, they made several blunders. For instance, it is reported that nobody could keep their mouth shut about the conspiracy. 2 weeks before the coup attempt, early in 2004, the plot was even discussed at a semi-public meeting at Chatham House, an international relations think tank in London. As a result, various governments knew about the plans, and in the end, Angola's government tipped off the presidency of Equatorial Guinea, but several other governments might have also done so. The mercenaries were to be recruited in South Africa, and an advance party led by Nick du Toit set up a fisheries business in Equatorial Guinea as a front. By late January of 2004, 55 men had been hired and were doing small squad tactics training at a farm in South Africa. The final preparation stages were completed in February of 2004. Using his military and arms dealing contacts, Nick du Toit helped introduce Simon Mann to the head of the Zimbabwean defense industry to purchase the weapons. So in early February of 2004, Simon Mann and Nick du Toit traveled to Harare, Zimbabwe to purchase the stock of weapons needed for the operation. It is suspected that the Zimbabwean defense industry officials initially didn't care enough about Simon Mann and du Toit's motivation of purchasing the arms to refuse the $180,000 that they paid in exchange for 61 AK-47 assault rifles with 45,000 rounds of ammunition, 20 PKM light machine guns with 30,000 rounds of ammunition, 100 RPG anti-tank launchers with 1,000 rockets, and so on and so on. You get the picture. It was a lot of weapons. So this is how the mercenaries were planning to execute the coup, and in all honesty, it looked like a very simple plan, at least on paper. The main force, after picking up the weapons in Harare, would fly to Equatorial Guinea and meet up with another team that had been in the country for about a week. This team was led by Nick du Toit. The president of Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang, would be lured to the airport to inspect cars that the advance team was supposedly going to give him as a gift. Once he was away from the safety of his presidential palace, the plane coming from Zimbabwe would arrive and overpower the president's bodyguards. This would happen while a separate team would set up roadblocks to prevent the military from leaving their bases and moving into town. About an hour after Teodoro Obiang had been detained or killed, the exiled opposition leader Severo Moto would be installed as the new president. And as I mentioned earlier, in exchange for putting Moto in power, the mercenary force was going to be given $1.8 million and valuable oil concessions. After the mission, the mercenaries were to fly to the DRC, where the arms and ammunition bought from Zimbabwe were to be handed over to rebels in Katanga. So that was the plan in a nutshell, but now it was time to put theory into practice. The coup was slated for February 18, 2004, where Simon Mann and co. were supposed to pick up the weapons in Harare and then meet up with the mercenaries to combine forces and commence the coup. However, the operation hit an insurmountable snag. The plane carrying the mercenaries had hit a bird and broke its nose wheel, leaving the plane a motionless hulk of metal in Ndola, Zambia. The 50 men who had flown up to Ndola in Zambia from Vanderboom Airport in Pretoria were left stranded and had to make their way back home. This made Simon Mann to put a hold on the weapons and to fly from Harare to Ndola to drop off money for the plane repair. Furious at the setback, Simon Mann sidelined his pilot, whom he blamed for the mishaps, and hired Ivan Pienaar, a South African pilot and former mercenary for UNITA, to develop the new aviation logistics. This was a decision that likely cost Mann dearly, since it would be this new plan that would be leaked directly to the highest level of the Angolan government, leading to the exposure of the coup. But more on that later. Soon enough, they bounced back and preparations for the coup money, men, logistics and a suitable plane were set in motion. Mann himself sold some of his shares in some companies and put in $400,000 to cover the cost of a specially converted Boeing 727, which was brought a week before the coup attempt from a firm in Kansas in the United States. So here are the events that ensued. On March 7, 2004, at around 4 p.m., the Boeing 727 took off from South Africa with 68 passengers on board, heading due north to Zimbabwe, but first touching down in Polokwane, South Africa to clear immigration. Simon Mann was already on the ground in Zimbabwe, making sure that the arms for the mission were ready and the collection would be smooth. At around 6:20 p.m., the Boeing 727 lifted from the runway in Polokwane. A few days earlier, permission had been obtained to land the plane at the airport and proceed to its military zone, known as the MANYAME AIRBASE. And soon enough, the plane touched down in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now here's where the trouble started. According to Zimbabwean officials, the pilot did not report his passengers who were concealed in the darkened cabin of the plane. Apparently, written instructions were circulated telling the men on board to keep still and silent after landing. One air traffic controller said that they were told that there had only been 3 crew members on board. This would further raise suspicions amongst the Zimbabwean officials and give them impetus to bust the operation. When officials demanded to look inside the 727, Simon Mann admitted that over 60 passengers were on board and reportedly offered a $10,000 gift if they looked away. The Zimbabwean officials refused. So here's what was going on. These mercenaries, including Simon Mann, they had no idea that they were heading into a sting operation. You see, Simon Mann could have probably collected his guns in February as initially planned with no questions asked. But by March, a few weeks on, South Africa had shared intelligence reports with Zimbabwean officials about these imminent dodgy activities which were now unfolding in Harare. Even in Equatorial Guinea, by March the government had every reason to expect a coup attempt. President Obiang had made a formal trip to South Africa in December of 2003 and met with the then President Thabo Mbeki. Intelligence was exchanged. Now, early in March of 2004, days before the coup, a South African intelligence team chartered a plane to Malabo and warned the government there of impending trouble. A day or so later, the Minister of Security, Nguema Mba, an uncle of Teodoro Obiang, rushed to Angola to hear a more detailed warning. He was told that a flying force would join a team of plotters already in place in Equatorial Guinea. Angola had its intelligence from spies in South Africa and maybe from mercenary rivals to Simon Mann. So now officials in Equatorial Guinea as well as officials in Harare, Zimbabwe were now on high alert and were ready to deal with the mercenaries. Remember when I said that these guys couldn't stop talking about their plan, so this was now coming back to bite them. Anyways, back in Harare, on the evening of the 7th of March 2004, Simon Mann and two other associates were now asked to inspect the weapons that they had purchased in crates atop pallets in a nearby hangar. As they were inspecting the goods, they realized that what was there did not correspond to their order and they complained to the officials. All this time, an operative of Zimbabwe's Central Intelligence Organization, the CIOs, was lurking in the shadows and filming the men. All of a sudden, plainclothes police and soldiers stormed into the hangar and pounced on the squad. The men were handcuffed and dragged away to vehicles parked outside the hangar. Mann and his associates were promptly bundled into separate cars and driven away. The armed officials also barged onto the plane. Most of the guys on board were fast asleep when the officials stormed in up the back entrance of the plane. Troops with AK-47s ran up the aisle, seized control and forced the passengers and crew off at gunpoint. Zimbabwean officials later claimed that they planned to detain Simon Mann anyways as he lacked an end-user certificate for the weapons that he had purchased. Word that the men had been arrested soon got to Nick du Toit and the guys in Equatorial Guinea. Word soon got to Nick du Toit and the guys in Equatorial Guinea that Simon Mann and the squad had been arrested in Zimbabwe. However, they decided to stay put in Malabo. The following day, on 8 March, 15 of the guys in Equatorial Guinea, most of them South Africans, including Nick du Toit, were arrested. Also, one more thing about the night of the 7th. Severo Moto, the president-in-waiting, and his entourage were on standby in Bamako, Mali, having flown in from Canary Islands where they had been based. They had been waiting for the green light to go to Equatorial Guinea once the Wonga Coup had been successful. But alas, this never precipitated. Deflated, they made a U-turn back to the Canary Islands, with their tails between their legs. With that, the Wonga Coup was over. I know I've been talking for a very long time, so now let me give you a quick rundown of the aftermath of the coup. A few months later, on 28 July 2004, in Harare, Simon Mann pleaded guilty to attempting to possess dangerous weapons. A month later, a Zimbabwean court jailed him for 7 years. He was based in Zimbabwe's Chikurubi maximum security prison. On the 25th of August of the same year, after confessions from Simon Mann, police in South Africa arrested Mark Thatcher on suspicion of helping finance the plot. On 13 January of 2005, Thatcher pleaded guilty to the role in the plot under a plea bargain agreement that allowed him to avoid jail time. He got a 4-year suspended jail sentence and he left South Africa. Meanwhile, back in Equatorial Guinea, in November of 2004, The courts there convicted 11 foreigners and 2 local men on charges linked to the plot. Nick du Toit was slapped with a 34-year jail sentence. On 15 May of 2005, Zimbabwe freed the crew of 60-odd South African mercenaries more than a year after they had been arrested, but South Africa promised to charge under its strict anti-mercenary laws. About 2 years later, in 2007, was still languishing in jail and was expecting to be released early. However, a Zimbabwean magistrate ruled that he be extradited to Equatorial Guinea. He was extradited to Equatorial Guinea on 30 January 2008 and taken to Black Beach Prison in Equatorial Guinea. His lawyers would insist that he was illegally removed by being moved in secret before an appeal process was finished. On 20th March, Equatorial Guinea issued a warrant of arrest for Mark Thatcher. Simon Mann and 7 others went on trial in Malabo, and Simon Mann was sentenced to 34 years in jail. November 2009 would see Equatorial Guinea's president, Teodoro Obiang, pardon Simon Mann on humanitarian grounds, and he was free to go. I'll leave it to you guys to double-click on what happened here. As for Eli Khalil, the government of Equatorial Guinea sued him for his plot in the coup. And just like that, the Wonga Coup had come to a screeching, grinding halt. Maybe it was purely Murphy's Law coming into play, or just a result of bad planning and naivety from the mercenaries. Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are on this. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.